All right, this will be a very quick introduction for chapter 28. I've already recorded part two and part three, so this will be the beginning, which is part one. Chapter 28 is looking at protists, and on the front here are some of my favorite protists to watch in the microscope. These are stentors, and they look like little trumpets, and they rotate around, and then little edges here are these little cilia, which allow for them to take food particles and other smaller protists inside of their bodies and to digest them. So stentors are again very common and very fun to watch in a microscope. Okay, um, so in the past we have looked at pond water and we have seen that there are quite a few different types of organisms that are microscopic. Most of those organisms that we're looking at are protists. A lot of them are algae as well, and we'll be talking about that in later chapters. But protist is the name. Again, it's an informal name of the group that's mostly unicellular eukaryotes. So remember, most eukaryotic organisms are multicellular. Protists are the group that are not. And we've talked about this. Protists used to be just a kingdom within the Eukarya domain, but now scientists have reclassified it into a polyphyletic group, which we're going to go over throughout the rest of this chapter. Scientists are still working to reclassify protists, though, because remember, we said protists are kind of this catch-all category, and some of them are very different than others. So the reclassifications are going to continue, particularly as um, genetic sequencing of whole genomes continues to be easier and easier and cheaper as well. So again, big picture ideas. We just said protists are eukaryotes. They have those complex organelles that we find in those eukaryotic cells. It's also important to remember that most protists are unicellular. Some of them do adhere to each other and can communicate with each other, but they are unicellular. And the other thing is that most organisms in the eukaryotic lineages, if you were to look at a tree, are protists. And we're talking about just sheer numbers of the organisms. So because they are microscopic and we find them everywhere, again, lots of variation in where we find them, but often very aquatic and moist environments. Um, and we know, again, most of the earth is covered in water, or a major percentage of it is. So when we think about the abundance and the sheer numbers of these organisms, most of the eukaryotic organisms are protists. We've talked about this idea that there is a great diversity in the structures and the functions of protists. Like I said, it's very diverse. We will look at a good number of them in our lab. And like I said, most protists are unicellular, but there are some that are multicellular or they live in colonies, so they are colonial. Um, and they can be complex because they have those complex organelles that eukaryotic cells have. Um, they are nutritionally diverse. Again, they have a variety of ways that they are able to procure food products to make their ATP. There are protists that are classified as photoautotrophs, and those would be similar to um, plant cells in that they are performing photosynthesis using chloroplasts. So they would be making sugar molecules that they then would pass over to mitochondria for cellular respiration. Heterotrophs are similar again to what we are, those consumers. They are absorbing organic molecules or ingesting larger food particles that they then break down and use cellular respiration to metabolize and create ATP. And then there are some that do both. So mixotrophs are protists that have the ability to do both of these things depending on the environment. So perhaps sunlight is poor or they're not able to um, obtain enough sunlight to perform photosynthesis, then they can switch to being heterotrophs and can consume their food particles from the outside. In terms of reproduction, some of them reproduce asexually, like bacterial and archaeal cells that use binary fission, but there are others that reproduce sexually. And as we continue through this chapter, we'll highlight some of the species that perform or reproduce in these different ways. And that is the end of part one. So pick up with part two and then continue on with part three. Please, again, always let me know if you have questions as you're going through these recorded lectures. I'm hoping that you are going to have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.